Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm your host, Cheryl Hentz. Very pleased to welcome back to the show someone who's been on many times, but it seems like never quite enough because we never quite finish our topics. But tonight we're going to try and finish them. But he'll still be on in the future, too. The Oshkosh City Manager, Mark Rohloff, is here. Welcome.
It's always a pleasure, Cheryl. Hi.
Yeah. You just got back from a nice vacation. You're relaxed. Now you're ready to do this.
Yeah. Didn't get tanned. I kept the sunscreen on, but I'm ready to go. Nice and rested. And,
yep.
Ready to attack the next quarter of the year.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to talk about a lot of different things here. And I tried to put these in some kind of order, but I've got some citizen questions mixed in with some of my own. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Red Earth development, Red Earth LLC development out along Lake Butamore Road. That is an 8 to 10 year project. There was a first phase that had been approved, and then it got changed, and then I think got changed again or something. It's had some changes. But now, at a recent council meeting, the council approved all phases. Why the fast tracking of approving everything for an 8 to 10 year project?
I think the concern that the developers had was that they wanted to make sure that their project budget and everything that was associated with it was going to be able to be done in its entirety. Because if the scope of the project was changed halfway through, then the return on the investment, there's a lot of investment that they have to do up front. Think of clubhouse, other things that are pretty capital intensive on the front end, the infrastructure and everything. So if things got changed down the road, then it might not pencil out for them financially. So they wanted the assurance before they got started that the general concept had been entirely approved by council last year. They just wanted to make sure, okay, for the specific portions, are you guys still okay with what we're proposing? Because we don't want to see it changed 3 years, 5 years from now.
Yeah, and you know what? That makes total sense. That's what I kind of said too. My brother actually brought it up and said, I bet this is the reason why. And as he and I talked about it, I thought, yeah, I bet that is why. Because, I mean, it's like if you're building your own house and you get a loan from the bank to build that house, and then partway through you decide you want to change it, and you come up with different blueprints or whatever, that may affect whether or not the bank's going to give you a loan and that kind of thing. So, when you put it in that kind of perspective, it does make some sense. Now, what if they incur some changes or encounter problems as they're doing this? Because 8 to 10 years is a long time.
They would have to come back if they wanted to make some changes. They would have to come back and say, we want to do this or that. Because this specific site plan has now been approved, that pretty much locks them into what they're saying, that they can't change it. Anybody could slow it down, but they couldn't change it without council approval. So they've kind of locked themselves in a little bit as well. They could come back and say, we want to build a 5th story because they got approved for 4th story. That would require an entirely different change. If they wanted to do extra garages or something like that, that would be an entirely different change. So I think they wanted to make sure that the minimum amount of units were approved so they know that cash flow is going to be. I don't anticipate the scale going up or down, but it could get modified because of something happens in the market that they think maybe more 2-bedroom units are better than efficiency units, stuff like that. And that does go through cycles. Efficiency units a couple of years ago were really popular. Yeah. Well, how long is that going to last? So they might change their mind on those types of things, but they'd have to come back. So we anticipate they've got a pretty standard model that we've seen in the other communities they've done. So I expect any changes would be pretty minimal.
What other communities have they put similar type developments in, and how long have they been there, and how successful are they?
They're pretty much based out of the La Crosse area. So La Crosse, And now I got to do my Wisconsin geography. Holmen, Onalaska, that area, they've done quite a bit of work. And our staff has been over in La Crosse for conferences, so they swung by and checked those out. And for the most part, we've seen good experiences with them. They're LLCs. They always form a different LLC for each of these projects. The LLCs have held up their end of the bargain, not delinquent taxes, which are things that a lot of people look at and say, hey, if they're not doing this, how can we count on them? So they've got a different business model, which I think helps them. They're actually started as a lumber company, so they've got a lumber business along with doing the building now. So their main supplier is themselves. Okay. So they've got that. What's the term? The supply chain is kind of there because they've got it. So
they don't really have the supply chain issues that someone like Mill on Main might run into.
Yeah,
and I want to talk about that too. But so has this? I'm assuming since the council's approved it and the Plan Commission recommended approval of it, and they're already starting to put in some infrastructure. I'm assuming that the DNR has already signed off on this. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, all of those things have been addressed, and there were some inferences that things weren't done from a state historical society. They were. DNR, they were. All those things, they got pre-approved before they came to the council even.
Yeah. Why would the historical society have anything to do with it?
Just like we're dealing with Menominee Park, they always want to make sure that there's no history of any, artifacts or anything like that.
Oh, okay.
And there was somebody who raised the issue, oh, you didn't do this. And it's like, nope, here's the checklist. They check those things out. Right. And then some people who were opposed to the project called the Historical Society and said, you're wrong. And they're like, no, we're not. We've looked at these things and we've given them their approval. So we don't approve those things. We want to make sure that they've checked them off their list, and we were able to confirm that.
Right,
so
right.
that stuff was taken care of. But yeah, it's until you find something, people don't know about us doing those things. But like we said, at Menominee Park, we went through that process and something came up, and so we had to address it.
Yeah, what was it? Was it the Leach Amphitheater when that was being built that some bones had been found or something? There was something being built in the last maybe 10, 15 years where some bones were found.
That was before my time, so
okay.
I don't. Right. We did find some artifacts when we were doing some of the work at Lakeshore Park. Oshkosh Corp did find a few things, not as not super significant, but enough to have an archaeologist out there from UW-Milwaukee on a pretty regular basis. Mm-hmm. So very similar to what we're going through at Menominee Park, but over in the Butamore development, nothing of the sort came up.
Yeah, and I know that you saw the show where I had two of the residents on from out there, and they were concerned, and rightfully so, those of us who are into nature, environment, animals, that kind of thing. They were concerned about the various species of wildlife that are out there. The DNR had no problems with those concerns at all?
No, none at all. About 90% of the site is going to remain untouched because most of it is wetland, so they couldn't touch any of that. So there's just a circle, but if you take a look at the map of the property they own and what they're proposing to develop, it's about 10% of the site. It's not very big, so it's. I would agree with somebody who would say, well, that's an intensive use. For the site in question, yes, but the larger site, there's 90% of it's still going to be in natural state, untouched.
Okay. That's a good thing. So where they're constructing this then, Mark, that's not in wetlands area?
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know also, because I know that was one of my concerns, and a lot of concerns of people that I spoke with about it, that, geez, if it's going on wetland area, how is that weight of that building, including underground garages, how is that going to be supported? And I know you can do a lot with footings and all this stuff, but that makes sense now.
Yeah. It's a small, a relatively small portion for that whole site, so they can do it there, but they can't do it anywhere else. So that there'll still be a very large buffer. Okay. Probably about, because it goes around the site, about 2 or 3 times the width of the site is actually in that buffer area I call it buffer, but it's in
yeah.
it's all wetland, and they can't touch that.
Yeah. You know, it's funny because you always hear about NIMBYs. NIMBYs, not in my backyard. People who don't want something built where it's being proposed to be built. And this may have been before your time also, but I'm not sure. The fishing pier that's down at the end of
New York Avenue.
And I was, I don't live down there. I can't afford to live down there. I don't make that kind of bucks. But I was one of those people who said, oh my God, this is going to be awful. It is going to impede people's view. It's going to impact home values and all. I was one of those people. I was a NIMBY, even though it's not going in my backyard or front yard, as the case may be. But once it was in, I looked at it. You can drive down Menominee Drive now and go past that, and you barely even know it's there. It just, a nice job was done with it. And that was that the Parks Department that had to approve that? Or was that?
The Parks Board, but I changed some things. I wasn't here for that, but it happened like the year before. Yeah. And one of the things that I made staff really think about is, yes, I know sometimes you want to be efficient and get things through, but at the same time, whether you didn't agree with it at the time, and whether your revelation comes a couple years later, or if you give it another week or two. But what had happened was it was put on the Parks Board agenda on Monday night, and Tuesday night approved by the council. And I said, we can't be fast tracking these things. So, you mentioned before we started the show, you read the city newsletter. So thank you. And thank you for being a subscriber.
Well, your newsletter, yes.
Yeah, the newsletter I put out weekly to council. Yep. One of the things I do with staff is when we're talking about these types of things, it's like, you need to do a newsletter article on that. Because one of the things council talked to me about when I first started was, we don't like Friday night surprises. And what Friday night surprises are something we put on the agenda that they have no knowledge of, and it's coming out of left field.
Yeah.
And it's like, where did this happen? Well, we need it approved now. It's like, why didn't you tell us about this? This just didn't happen last week. So I really emphasize with the staff, we need to do a better job of that. And there were some criticisms about the Bunamore project, which I think, there was some legitimacy to. We did the formal noticing requirement. But because of the size of the property and the buffer zone that's not owned by them, the buffer zone beyond that, and because there's a tree area, we said, well, we're not required to notify anybody but these property owners, so we notified only 2 or 3. It was a very small number. But that trust issue comes up, and it's like, it looks like it's getting fast-tracked, and if it's getting fast-tracked, there's got to be a nefarious reason. Whether there is or not, we have an obligation to say, take a breath, slow down, what concerns are going to come up, let's anticipate what some of the concerns are, try to be a little more proactive about it. So if I was doing this all over again, we probably would have had the neighborhood meeting before, but once the people came to the Plan Commission, we had done something nefarious. We didn't, but can we go a little more than the minimum requirement? And we wrestled with that and said, we don't need to, we're okay. Where we noticed was it would have been people actually outside the city. When it's rezoned, we do notify the neighboring town, but we don't necessarily notify everybody in that area. So do we arbitrarily draw a circle and then increase it just because we think, and that was the thing we wrestled with. But in retrospect, maybe that may have been better. And the next time around, when we did this last one that you just asked about, we did a meeting where we notified a much larger area. It was just to be safe about it. And so, look, we're not trying to hide anything. You still may not like it, but at least you had an opportunity. And I think sometimes, given the opportunity. But I know on that New York Avenue pier, it looked like it was getting ramrodded, and I think that was part of the problem.
And I think that certainly was upsetting to me, and I think that's what upset other people too. And but I don't often feel like the city is trying to push something through, behind someone's back or sneak it through under their noses. Because I kind of see what goes on, and I've served on enough committees and boards within the city that I know you guys always try to do due diligence, but it's good, I think, because in a case like this, it's people were left out, even though they weren't within the area that you needed by ordinance and by city ordinances and so forth. You didn't have an obligation to notify them, but I'm glad to hear that you guys will, look at that a little bit differently in the future.
Yeah, we always have to, I call it, looking at the tape the day after the game. Mm-hmm. What did we do and how could we do it better? And there are times like, okay, we could have done this better or that better. And it's like you try to learn. And part of that, notifying people in advance, notifying council so that it's not on the agenda and where did this come from. So we've avoided the Friday night surprises with as much advance notice. That doesn't mean everybody's going to hear about it and we can say we did that, but at least we demonstrate we made the effort. And it's never going to be perfect, but we try to cover as many bases as we can so that when it does come up, and there's plenty of things you're probably going to ask about. It's like, and some people won't know about those things until after they're approved, and why didn't I know about this? Well, mostly because you're living your life, you're doing things, you got a family, you got kids, you got pets, you're busy doing things.
Yeah.
And you're not paying attention. I know that everything we do at the city, you and I love, we pay attention to it. Other people are just living their life.
I still miss some things that the city is doing from time to time, and I'm like, what? They're doing what?
Yep. But so it's a constant improvement process that we just have to commit ourselves to every single time. So I'm willing to look at the game tape the day after and say, could we have done this a little better? And generally it's like, yeah, we could do this and that. And that's part of, I think, our obligation to continue to serve and continue to provide that information. And I guarantee I will screw up again.
We're human beings.
We're human beings, and and I'm willing to admit it. And I think we could have done a better job that time. But I think in the end, it got vetted out in the public. And while not everybody can agree with us, I think a lot of people understand now what we're doing, and I think that's a good thing.
And hopefully, when this is all built, or as it's being built, hopefully the neighbors out there will, see, well, they're not going to see the same thing I saw with the fishing pier, but you know what I mean. I'm not speaking literally, I'm speaking figuratively. Hopefully they will see that it's not as much of an eyesore as they're maybe thinking it's going to be.
Right.
So hopefully that will be the case.
Yeah.
I guess on the same topic of developments, why don't we stay on that topic? Mill on Main, we've talked about that several times in the past. That's supposed to be down on Main Street at the end of 7th, but on the east side of Main. That project has been kind of sitting in the works for almost a year and a half now, if not longer.
That's fair.
And they haven't even dug the first hole of ditch of mud or dirt, whatever. They've not broken ground yet at all. What's happening with that?
I had an opportunity, I got breaking news. I had an opportunity to go there a couple weeks ago. Community Development Director Kelly Nyforth and I had a chance to go there and kind of say, what's the status? Because they have a deadline coming up when they're supposed to start construction.
When's that deadline?
Well, that deadline is March 31. So we actually have on the March 26th agenda an item to amend that, to extend that. So we knew they wanted an extension, and we said we wanted to visit them face to face and say, all right, you got to help us understand why has it been floundering. And it's a lot of getting the right interest rate, getting the right financing. They indicated to us that all of their private equity, the funds they need to raise internally, that a bank wants to see, they've completed that, but finding the bank that gives them the best rate, gives them the best terms, that's what they're looking for. So we discussed what we could do, because a lot of times that's local folks and they don't have relationships with local folks. So I said, let us try to help you. So with Greater Oshkosh Economic Development, our staff, just talking to them. So in terms of their projects, they've got about 3 or 4 different project managers. This project manager, this is their next project. They have just completed one, and now it's like this is the one on their front burner. So they've indicated to me that that's a front burner issue now, and they want the extension. They had asked about other things, and we said, no, we don't think that's appropriate, but we will help you introducing you to various lenders in the area. So if you're a local banker watching this show, give me a call. I'm happy to connect people.
Sure.
But that's where the status is right now. We've been concerned, obviously. They've had slow starts in other communities, and it's usually about the same thing. And they explained to me just how some of the banks are wanting to do just more local lending rather than widespread lending. They want it to be closer to their home turf. So they're doing very well on their projects in the Madison area. Some of the outlying areas, they got a project in Neenah that they're working on, and they did get local financing for that.
Really?
They got one, I believe, in Green Bay and one in Wausau, along with a few other places. But this project manager's, this is their next project, and he said this is number one, full force. So we're going to be recommending that we extend the start date to the end of the year, the end of this year, and they would hope to.
That's a long.
Well, just to give them time to get, because they don't have the financing lined up yet. So they want to be able to get that all lined up, and they want that cushion. But normally what a builder does is they get it started in the fall before things start to freeze, because they can't excavate in January if things are freezing. So they gave themselves a cushion of December 31. But we discussed, they could do something that's very disingenuous by turning, literally turning a shovel, and technically that meets the requirements. I don't want you to do anything for show. I want you to start this project. So please don't do that. It's like, I'll go to council and I'll explain this. So that's what I plan to do. And by the time this airs, that issue will hopefully have been discussed with the council. So that's kind of where it's going.
Developer is T-Wall?
T-Wall out of Middleton.
Okay, Middleton. All right. So I know that's a TIF. They're asking for TIF money there, right?
Yes.
Let me look at my notes here. So that is going to be, let me see, approximately 291 luxury apartments. I don't know what constitutes it being luxury, but I'm sure it's going to have a luxurious price tag. 19,000 commercial square feet, 240 to 255 underground parking stalls, 194 surface parking stalls, 3 5-story buildings constructed on almost 13 and a half acres, one building at a time, with the first 2 phases including approximately 10,000 square feet of commercial space in each building. One which will be a restaurant with water views of both the Fox River and Lake Winnebago. Is that still the plan that as they presented it a year and a half, 2 years ago?
They didn't ask for any changes. In fact, when we went down, they gave us a tour of a similar type of site that they've done in downtown Middleton. So I got to see the underground parking. I got to see some of the amenities. Got to see some of the units. So I mean, they're the luxury units. I think they have some features. Countertops are a little more upgraded type of thing. That's what I think means their definition of luxury. Yeah. But along the water, that's generally what you're going to expect.
That's going to be more money.
Meanwhile, the Butamore development is a little more modest, although rents over $1,000 are not that unusual these days. So, but these will probably be upwards of $1,500, $2,000 a month.
Good God.
Yeah, it's a lot different than our mortgages.
I can't afford that. I don't know who these people are who are renting all these apartments, or what they do, where they're. I don't even know where all these people are coming from. I know our population is projected to grow, but I don't know where all these people are coming from. This here is 291 units, so almost 300, 522 on Lakeshore or Lake Butamore Drive. I don't know where all these people are coming from.
Well, I just listened to a presentation from the university about, they are still producing about 1,600 graduates a year. So, and 90% of them stay in Wisconsin. So the answer is, a lot of the university students, 4Imprint is still expanding, growing. You've got the Theta Care micro hospital going in.
Yep.
So we got a handful of things that I think are going to, continue to do well on. So I think it's meeting those demands. I know I've talked to people who, friends of my son's who would look at Oshkosh Corp, but they're like, there wasn't enough housing available. So they were just like, I turned down the job with Oshkosh Corp because of the housing. And I was like, said, well, we got to find them a place. We want them to come here.
Yeah.
So I think the companies are still expanding, and I think it's young professionals that don't want to be bogged down with a mortgage, especially with rates right now. Empty nesters who are just like, I don't want the responsibility of a of home ownership or anything like that. So that's where it's coming from. And we had a housing study done that said we have a range of needs. The very low end and the very high end are our two greatest needs. So the in-between stuff is generally getting filled with some of the market, and I think that's where Butamore is coming in. But we also have an obligation about the low end, and that's something we have to look at as well.
Okay.
That's not going to be along the river, but we still have to address it.
Okay. I made a few notes here, but things I don't want to forget to ask. So now, I've tried explaining to people how TIF districts work. It's kind of a confusing thing because people are saying, well, they're not paying taxes on this. Well, they eventually will be paying taxes on it. But so can you just, since Mill on Main is, that's what, a 27-year TIF? Is that what that's going to be? Worth how much?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Let me look at my notes.
Yeah, you
Maybe
might have it in your notes.
I might have it here somewhere.
But while you're looking, I'll give you a little time to look.
Yeah.
They do pay taxes. So property tax abatement is a term that's used in other states. It is illegal in Wisconsin. So they have to pay their taxes. The question is with a tax increment district, you have a piece of property that, say, the value of the property is this level. After development, the property goes up to this amount. And the tax that's generated by that extra incremental value is what tax increment is. So that tax increment is used to provide financial incentives for items that unique development challenges. And down at the Sawdust District, it's Sawdust District for a name because the soils are generally either A, very soft because it was sawdust, or it was sawdust mixed with a bunch of not so good stuff, and there's contamination that's got to get cleaned up. That's going on with the Theta Care project, a lot of contamination, things that terms of contaminants that I haven't heard about in years, but that site's been sitting there for a long time and has been untouched. So you've got, I heard the term, dioxin. I haven't heard the term dioxin in about 30 years. But that is an old. Those are some of the things that made eagles' shells so fragile. That's what some of that was. So when we hear those terms, it kind of brings back things that I was dealing with early in my career, and we have to address those things. These developments could go anywhere else, but they're willing to come here if we help them take care of those issues. So the tax increment will help take care of the remediation, take care of other costs that they have that they might not incur if they went somewhere else. And it's called the but-for clause. But for this incentive, this development wouldn't happen. So that's the standard upon which we use it.
So I did find something here. I don't know if it's what I was actually looking for, but it might help. But let's talk about those contaminants. So is it still looking like those contaminants are going to have to be moved out of state?
Generally, it depends on what the law is. So I'm not an expert on that, but if it's not allowed in the state, then it has to go to another certified site. And the DNR will not let you move it off a site until you've identified where it goes, and it has to be approved. So if it has to go out of state, it goes out of state. We do have a local landfill right outside of Berlin called Valley Trail. There is a part of that landfill that's dedicated for contaminated soil. So generally, that's where most of it goes.
Valley Trail, huh?
Valley Trail landfill in Berlin. Now that goes back because I was the administrator in Berlin 30 years ago, Cheryl. So I
You've been at this game a long time.
doing
Mark.
this a little bit, yeah. So I know Valley Trail is a very well-run, well-regarded type of facility. But even the Theta Care folks were like, we have to make sure that there was one that he said, if this contamination is as bad as we fear, that might have to require something in rural Canada.
Yeah, that was
is that
one
the
of
one
the
you
things
heard about?
that I had read, and that's why I was thinking, my God, think about the costs that are incurred with something like that.
Which is why you have what's called extraordinary costs with these developments. And because, Theta Care actually owns property out there on Highway 21 near Aurora Hospital. They could go out there. Yeah. They're choosing to come downtown, and we're so excited about that. It's going to it's going to return a hospital to east of 41. Yeah. And the T-Wall site is going to restore some development and some economic vibrancy to that part, and I think it'll help be a great offset with the arena and everything that can go in between. Yeah,
great. All right. So what I've found, let's see. The city projects that about $47.8 million in improved value will result from the T-Wall project, Mill on Main. It is a 27-year TID, or
tax increment district versus tax increment financing. Yeah.
Yeah. You hear sometimes TID, sometimes TIF. It's tax incremental district, tax incremental financing. They're really one and the same.
They really are.
I mean, people just use those abbreviations interchangeably. Whether or not they're mutually exclusive, who knows? But they're used.
They're pretty much used interchangeably, and TIFs become a verb.
Right.
We TIF it. Yeah. So it's not a verb, it's an acronym.
So my notes say the city will spend just under $29 million for project plan costs, and that includes an estimated $20.07 million in pay-as-you-go development incentives, principal and interest, administrative costs, and then an additional estimated $8.7 million in contingent expenditures. But I don't see here how much this whole project is going to be worth. I guess we just have to kind of go with the $47.8 million in improved value once it's done.
Since it's $47.8 million, I'll give you a good rule of thumb. And if your viewers watch this, there's a lot of detail in there, but if we just round that up to 48, it makes the math easy, at least for somebody like me.
All right.
Generally, the principal amount for a TIF is about 25% of the value. So in this case, $48 million. So in principle, we'll be able to provide assistance of no more than about $12 million, 1/4 of the 48. That's a good rule of thumb to carry with you. Now, when you add the interest and all these other things, it may come up more, but from a principal standpoint, when they're looking at it as a developer, they know that's really the limit that 27 years of tax increment can produce.
So helping people try to understand this, let's say they break ground this summer or early fall. They break ground and they start initial construction. At what point do they start paying taxes, and what portion of taxes are they paying as the project gets more and more completed?
Yeah.
Because I think that's what's confusing to people. And honestly, I'm not even sure that I fully understand it. I think I kind of do, but it's a confusing thing for people.
But start with, it's no different than the property taxes you pay on your own house. they have to pay their property taxes the same rate that you pay
On the land.
on the land, and
On
then
improved land.
and then the improvements that go with it. So
Right.
that 47.8 million, the first year it might only be, if they've only gotten the foundation down there, there's a value that'll be assigned to it on January 1st of 25.
Okay.
That tax bill gets created when the council at the end of 25 adopts the 2026 budget and sets technically the 2025 tax rate.
Okay.
Then those taxes, you get the bill in December and you have to pay it in its total by the end of July the following year.
Yeah.
So the value, there's a snapshot of the value on January 125. They get the bill that's technically not due till July of 26. They got to pay portions of it, just like us.
Yeah, like quarterly.
So once we confirm that they've paid it properly by all the deadlines, then we confirm that. So it's at the end of July, it's the last payments due. By September, we confirm that all the payments are there, and they generally get their TIF payment by November. So
And
that's
they
what
would
happens.
get a TIF payment of what amount? This 1/4%?
No, generally
25%,
we generally. I was just giving you a rule of thumb about how much the value
Yeah,
of it
yeah,
is
okay.
over the entire length of this thing.
Okay,
No, what
gotcha.
they'll get is they'll get anywhere from. For us, it's generally been about 75 to 90% of what they paid in taxes will get returned to them for that until the principal amount and whatever we agree to through a development agreement, or until the TIF runs out. They'll get 75 to 90% of the value of what they paid in taxes. So it's not a tax rebate, but if you're looking at it, it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
So
Does T-Wall own the land right now, Mark?
no, they don't, because we are not going to convey the land to them until they start construction.
So at the moment, it's sitting there, it's an unimproved piece of land sitting there, and the city owns it, and we're not getting squat in taxes.
Correct, but we want to make sure that we aren't giving them the land, so we'll lease
Prematurely.
it prematurely. So they'll still have, once we actually start typically with a lease. So they hold the land, but they have to fulfill certain requirements, then we'll convey the land with the building. And that's part of the development agreement. But we want to make sure that they do the work, because we don't want to give them the land and then they don't do anything. So
Right,
that's
right.
our protection. So
Right.
we're willing to accept no value, no tax, because the incentive is they're going to get it once they start developing.
Sure.
So their incentive is to get this thing started sooner rather than later.
Okay. All right. Oh, my God. I just was told we've got 20 minutes left. I don't know where this time goes, Mark. I know we've just spent a lot of time on this, but I think it's important that people understand it. Okay.
So what else do you want to know in the 20 minutes we got left?
Well, I want to talk about what was just approved at a recent city council meeting, and that's the vehicle registration fee of $35 per vehicle and the increased water utility costs that go along with that. And I believe it's 0.25% up to maybe a 0.5%
Yeah.
increase in our water utility. So the first, and one of the things I'm going to be talking about with Lori Palmieri when she comes on the show is, and yes, she will be on the show in May. So for anyone watching who is interested one way or the other, one of the things I want to talk with her about is the fact that, this 8,000 pound limit, because any car under 8,000 pounds or any vehicle under 8,000 pounds is going to be assessed this fee. And everybody, including myself, is saying, but wait, it's the heavier vehicles that are doing the most damage to the street. And I didn't understand until one of the candidates for city council explained it to me, that the city has no control over that. It's a state thing. And so I'm going to be talking to her about, okay, let's get this changed if we can at the state level so that the vehicles that are doing the damage are paying something for riding on our streets. But I'm concerned, well, first of all, when can people start expecting to see this $35 fee? Is that going to be on property tax bills? Or I don't know how it can be, because a lot of vehicles...
I can explain very
Go ahead.
easily.
Go ahead.
You get that little card in the mail that says you got your vehicle registration's coming up due. For registrations that will begin with a July 1st date or later, you can get those bills as early as May. And so May and June. So we're gearing up for registrations that take effect July 1. The Department of Motor Vehicles with the State Department of Transportation administers that. So it'll be added to your on your card.
Okay.
So if you noticed on that card, it says your vehicle is kept in County
Such
of
and such a
Winnebago,
county,
City of Oshkosh. The reason that exists on that is if the municipality, city, county, town, village, enacts a vehicle registration fee, that's where it says, okay, this person is subject to a Winnebago County or City of Oshkosh. So you'll see it on your vehicle registration.
So I'm escaping it this year then, because I already have received my notice and my registration expires at the end of May. So I avoided the bullet for this year. But, okay, so that's that. And when will the water utility increases go into effect?
It will vary. Sewer will happen sooner rather than later, because we actually already increased the sewer rates for this year. So we're going to come back with that. And it's only going to be about a 0.1% increase. And it's going to vary, each year based on what that is. What we did was, and we had not done this for years, when we excavate a street to reconstruct it and we do utilities with it, we haven't charged the utility for anything but the pipe that they're putting in. But all that excavation is primarily for utilities. So we looked at some of the Public Service Commission regulations, and they allow a city to charge for an 8-foot trench for water, and then the state doesn't regulate sewer or storm sewer rates, but we use the same principle. What is the cost of an 8-foot trench for water? Then we applied the same thing. That's where we came up with the $750,000. That was our estimated cost. So that's how we assigned the $750,000. Then we went back and said, how does it impact rates? And every year we do this, that'll be that little extra that we'll tack on. For sewer, it's almost immediate. We're probably going to do it within the next month. Storm sewer, we'll probably do it. We're looking at our rates, and I think we were going to hold off on an increase this year or do a very modest increase. With respect to water, because it is regulated by the state, we'll put it into our next rate application. It probably won't happen this year because we've got some work to do, and a state Public Service Commission application takes like 9 months. So I don't anticipate it to be until late in the year and maybe even into 2025.
Going back to the vehicle registration fee, what is in place? Because obviously, Madison is going to be collecting this extra $35 per vehicle. What kind of rules or regulations are in place to ensure that every penny of that money comes back to Oshkosh for our roads?
Well, by law, it must be used for transportation-related services. So we're bound by statute to do it that way. The state does get a little cut of 17 cents of that $35. So we'll technically get $34.83. And we will deposit that into our capital improvements fund that we use. We typically take the special assessment revenue and put it in there. We'll no longer put special assessment revenue in there. We'll put this revenue in there to take its place.
So, but we are guaranteed somewhere in our Constitution and our state zoning laws, or whatever laws they're looking at, we are guaranteed to get $34.83 back of every 35.
That's in the statute. The statute's existed for over 50 years, and it hasn't been updated, which is why the 8,000. The concern that people have about 8,000 is totally legitimate. If you watched this discussion over the years, I had to get pulled to that issue, I didn't like the fact that vehicles over 8,000 pounds were exempt. I know there are much larger vehicles that do pay some other fees to the state. They don't pay them to us, but they pay them to the state. But 8,000 pounds was relevant in 1967 when this law was adopted.
Yeah.
And
Totally
you know,
archaic.
I mean, you know, yeah, it's, so, and I've talked to Representative Palmieri. I have the benefit of having a prior relationship with her. She understands, city government. So we've had a discussion, and I know that she wants to do that, but, she's got to get other legislators, and I think a lot of people are starting to say, hey, this thing hasn't been touched. This law hasn't been changed in over 50 years. It's time to update it.
All right.
And I'd welcome that, and I would heartily endorse that.
Okay, great. All right, so I want to try and move quickly through some of these. Speaking of water bills and so forth, I noticed, and some others have brought it to my attention, that the city is billing, we're getting water bills sent out on a 28-day cycle. Now, there's only 1 month that has 28 days in it, and so, we're not paying more for water as a result of that, because usage is what usage is. But, other things, some of the other fees that we're paying for on our water bill, it seems to us, I say us because others have contacted me, like I said, it seems to us like because of that 28-day cycle that you're billing these water bills on, that the city is actually getting more money than it should for some of these things that they're charging us for. So why is that?
It's actually a 30-day cycle. We read on a 30-day cycle. So your observation.
You read the bills, or the
Right.
bills are, the water usage is.
But your bill is sent out based on that 30-day cycle. But I think your logic still has some legitimacy, because even with a 30-day cycle, there's a handful of months that have 31 days. And if you do it every 30 days, we're billing annually on 360 days. So there is a loss of 5 days, and I checked. Somebody told me you were going to ask me that question, so I was ready.
I don't know who would have told you that, because I just put this together today.
I'm not ratting out that person, but I was
I'm
told.
not asking you to, but I did discuss it with someone earlier this week.
Yeah.
And maybe she was your
I'm not
your
saying
little
anything.
birdie.
Well, that's okay, but
It's
we
fi-
do it on
it's
a
fine.
30-day cycle. But then the date it's due is based on a variety of things internally. But we bill it on a 30-day cycle.
Okay.
That is imperfect, because that's still, whether there's 365 days or 6 a year. So you can see it tightening up, and in some occasional cases, like a blue moon, you get twice in a month. And I double checked the 3 areas we have in 1 month. For one of the, we have 3 different zones in the city that we bill on. One of those zones, the bill's going to be due twice in a month.
Okay.
And that is a legitimate imperfection.
Okay, well, nothing's perfect, right? Okay, I want to get to some citizen questions here. How do you ensure that the city's services meet the needs of all of its citizens? And I guess that would be any of the city services, whether it's core services like water, police, fire, any of the services.
That is a constant, effort that we have to take a look at. Not everybody uses police services. When was the last time you called the police on 911? It's so.
I called 911 last Friday.
Okay,
About a
well-
vehicle that was, well, I'm not going to go into it because we're so short on time.
Yeah,
But I called 911 last
So
Friday.
we don't always use those services,
Yeah.
but when they're needed, they're needed. So, does everybody use police services? I would say a lot of people don't, but do they benefit from police services? I would say yes, mostly indirectly, but they do benefit from
Sure.
it. And same
Just by
thing with-
virtue of the patrols that we see
Yeah,
around.
I mean, the fire department is really one massive fire insurance company
Yep.
that makes sure that your house, the fire's put out. The EMS is essentially, the same thing. It's like a public version of health insurance. Now, there are some things, not everybody uses city parks. You might like walking, I might like biking, or another person might like pickleball. So not every service everybody takes advantage of, but collectively, I can tell you that even though you or I may not play pickleball, having pickleball courts provides an element of depth to our quality of life.
Sure.
And some people say, well, I shouldn't have to pay for that. You're paying for the package. So how do we make sure that everybody benefits? I would say I encourage you to take advantage of any city service we provide, but you're not physically going to be able to. You got a life to live, and you don't need to be using city services 24/7.
Right. What steps do you, the city, take to ensure transparency and accountability in city operations?
Yeah, I think if you take a look at our council agendas, that we probably have, and I'm going to say it, I think we have the best council agenda that you're going to see around here. We provide a great deal of detail on our agenda items. It's not just approve resolution, 1, 2, 3, 4. We provide some detail on that, and I'm very proud of that. And that's been something that I've always felt is necessary. But again, like I said earlier, constant improvement, taking feedback. My weekly newsletter is intended not just to give council the heads up on things that are coming down the pipe, but also give the public and anybody who does that. I think we're making better use of social media. I think we could make even better use of social media. And that's not for everybody. I used to jokingly say, right after I first got here, people love Oshkosh media. They love GovTV, which is the government channel. They love Life TV, which is the channel on this show, that this show's on. And I jokingly would say, I'm really popular with 70-year-old ladies because they watch GovTV. But younger people don't necessarily watch it. So we've added features like the City Manager Minute, which is a 1-minute video that I put on a variety of topics. I do one every week or two. We put it on social media, and it fills people in, whether it's about elections or the vehicle registration fee. I just did one.
I think there's a lot of information that you guys put out that many of us, including me, don't know every single thing that's put out. But I do think that the city tries to make people aware of what's going on. And I think sometimes it's, we may have to go to the city's website. We may have to watch, or listen to your new thing, the minute thing. But you've also got, the city manager's report that you do that airs on GovTV.
And we try to take excerpts of that because that's a 30-minute show.
Yeah.
And there are some people whose attention span does not go 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So our Oshkosh Media folks are now taking excerpts of that show and putting it on social media. So it's like, here's a discussion about the vehicle registration fee or the Lake Butamore project. And so they do that to keep people up to speed. But we have to keep looking for ways to improve.
Sure.
And if somebody says, well, you could do this, it's like, all right, I'll listen to that. You might see something different because I got a good suggestion.
Okay, excellent. Want to find out about the COVID money. ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act. People had, do they have until the end of March to get their applications in for ARPA money, or is that already passed?
It was March 1st,
Okay.
And we got 50 applications totaling nearly $12 million in requests, and we've got 2.3 million left.
Oh, wow.
So
after that 12 million, you've got
no.
You've just got 2 million left.
Yeah, I got
period.
2.3 million
And
on
there's
12 million in
applications
requests.
oh, boy.
Yeah, like 5 times the amount. So that we have available. So we'll have some things to do. So I work with staff on developing some review criteria so that we try to objectively look at all these different applications. And I'll be coming back to council shortly saying, here's what I think, and we'll see what they do with it.
Okay. We're like 3.5 minutes left. Just real quickly, the state of the city is on March 27th. What can you tell us about that?
Well, a lot of it
In
is
a couple minutes,
sure.
or less.
We're going to focus on just thematically, just our guiding principles that are in our strategic plan and examples of how we fulfill those things. I'm going to be talking about a lot of the street projects, talk a little bit about the special assessment reform that just occurred, and then talk about some of the upcoming developments that are out there. That's the major big things. But I think one of the things that I like to talk about is that we actually created 2 tax increment districts when we did Oshcorp. One for Oshcorp and one for the rest of the area. And that tax increment is doing very well because that development's doing very well. And I envision that one of the projects in there, I think we're going to be able to eventually pay cash for it, not borrow for it, is to get that intersection at Oshkosh Avenue and Sawyer Street redone. And I don't think I've heard a single person say, oh no, I love that intersection, Mark. Don't change a thing. I've got so many people that are like, are you serious? And it's like, it will not have a roundabout, okay? Yeah. It's too close to the bridge, so it won't be a roundabout. And the idea is to square it and make it a full, cross intersection so that we can access Rainbow Park.
And there's a house right there that has been raised in the last week or two, right on the corner there. So that's gone.
And we bought that. We bought that, and with the intent that would give us room to maneuver a new intersection around there. So you're going to see some work on that in the coming years. Down
on Oshkosh Avenue. Oh gosh, now it's 3 minutes. Down on Oshkosh Avenue, there is a building going up. It's a little bit west of Popeye's Fried Chicken and some of the new stuff that's gone in there. What is that building?
That's a True Hotel by Hilton.
True Hotel.
TRU. True Hotel by Hilton. They're kind of a little bit of extended stay, and I think that because of a lot of the businesses we have around there, Oshkosh Corp and different places, they like the extended stay where there's a little kitchenette, stuff like that.
Okay.
So that's what they're doing there.
All right. I just want to make one comment, and it's something that I think you guys as a city can do. Going back to water, these water pipes that are being replaced. It has been brought to my attention, besides the fact that we've got about just under 2 minutes, it's been brought to my attention that some of these contractors who are replacing these lead pipes, they are charging homeowners more because they think that the homeowner is automatically getting money back from the city. And I think that the city needs to be aware of that. So what I'm hoping you guys can do is educate and enlighten these contractors that not everybody's getting money back. Some may only be getting a little, some may be getting none. But if they're basing their prices on things, based on someone getting money back from the city, that's not right.
I agree, and so I appreciate you sharing that with me. We are trying to extend that program because the state grant money is running out, but we know the demand is still there. So as we develop new rules and that for that program, I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Okay. We don't even have enough time to go into this. I've got less than a minute. But
that just means I come back.
Right, again, and I apologize to the person who wrote in about, a discussion between city manager form of government and strong mayoral form of government. As you can see, there's just simply not enough time. But we'll have Mark back again very soon, I promise. So thanks for being here, though. I appreciate it always, always, always. And thanks to the crew, and of course, thanks to you. We will see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.